Today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. So, 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. And here it is. No. So, we're going to reinvent the phone.
Let's talk about how we come up with ideas. In this video, we'll learn about the 4 steps of concept generation, and then we'll look at some tools and techniques that can help stimulate creative thinking. First of all, let's start off with 2 quotes. The first is from Steve Jobs, who said, "Creativity is just connecting things, just like the iPod, the phone, and the internet communicator." The second is from Paul Rand, who is a very famous graphic designer. You'll learn more about him later on in the course. He said, "The designer does not begin with some preconceived idea. Rather, the idea is a result of careful study and observation, and the design is a product of that idea." This quote alludes to the fact that a designer should never start a job by knowing what the end result will be, because if he does, then he's starting the project with a closed mind. You need to trust the process and be comfortable with not knowing what the conclusion will be. You see, generating a design concept is a form of creative problem solving that requires an experimental, questioning mindset. This is a design process. Emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We've been through this before. Now we're going to focus on the ideate phase. We can break down ideation into 4 steps, and we'll go through each one in detail. Preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Step 1, preparation. This is easy. You just need to review your research and your strategy, adjust your mindset, and record any preliminary thoughts or insights. Get them down on paper so you can let go of them. Get those initial ideas out of the way. Step 2, incubation. This is where you take a break and turn the concept generation over to your subconscious mind. Try reading, create some art, see a film, listen to or play music, go for a walk, or even work on something else. I always try to include a few days between researching and strategizing a project and starting to think about solutions. I find that even when I'm not thinking about it, the project is still simmering away somewhere in my subconscious. Step 3, illumination. There are lots of techniques you can use if you don't know where to start. Sketch to think. I always have a bound notebook where I sketch all my ideas. Research some more. You can research competition, inspiring images. Pinterest is a great tool for that. Or you could discuss the project with anyone, because just voicing the problem can often help you figure out a solution. You can empathize with the user. Imagine them using your product. There are lots of concept generation exercises available, and we'll talk about a few. But last, but most important, trust the process. Trust the process, because it works. Step 4 is verification. This involves evaluating your idea and logically supporting your viewpoint. You need to think about clarity. Will your idea communicate clearly and quickly? Is it possible? Can your idea be implemented? Think of the time you have for this project. Will you be able to execute it well? Is it interesting? Will your concept ignite the audience's interest? Is it new? Is it forward-thinking? And think about the social proposition. Your responsibility as a designer. How does your concept benefit people or the community? So the 4 steps are preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Now let's focus on the illumination step, and let's look at some techniques that can help us there. First, there are rhetorical aids. Rhetoric is a technique that an author or speaker will use to try to persuade the reader of a certain perspective. Techniques you can use to make an argument and be persuasive are cultural allusion, amplification, analogy, understatement, hyperbole, metaphor, oxymoron, and personification. Let's look at a few of these. Analogy compares 2 similar things in order to explain an otherwise difficult or unfamiliar idea. This is by far the most commonly used rhetoric aid in graphic design. Here is an example of it being used to compare deforestation to lung cancer, since trees are often understood as our planet's lungs. Here, an analogy relates sperm to sharks, and a condom keeps them caged. Another analogy compares smoking to destroying our lungs, like a Space Invaders game. Another technique is Osborne's checklist. Take your problem and take Osborne's list of verbs, and apply them to the problem, because it might help trigger an idea. For example, adapt. What else is like this? What other ideas does this suggest? What could I copy? Whom could I emulate or modify? Could you put a new twist on the problem? Change the meaning, the color, the motion, the odor, the taste, the form, the shape? What other changes could you make to it? Or magnify. What could you add? More time? More space? Greater frequency? Make it stronger, higher, lighter, longer, thicker, heavier? Extra value? Maybe you could add an extra ingredients. You could duplicate, multiply, exaggerate. You get the idea. You can magnify, minimize, substitute, rearrange, reverse. These verbs are just ways of triggering thought, of triggering ideas. Another tool is brainstorming. Now, these days, many people use the word brainstorming just to refer to the act of thinking, but really brainstorming is a group activity. First, you need to research the audience, clearly and succinctly define the problem, determine the criteria, then you appoint 2 people, a note taker and a facilitator. Everyone else is just plain participants. The goal is to generate as many ideas as possible and encourage the free association of thoughts. There are some rules to brainstorming. You don't judge, no criticism. Think bigger and bigger. Try to build on ideas. Focus on quantity, not quality. And be a yes and responder. You know, the rules are remarkably similar to those of improv theatre. Here's a clip of Tina Fey talking about improv. Improv is about learning to be spontaneous and letting your ideas blossom. It's a journey of discovery. You have to trust your subconscious to deliver a thought, which you can build on to get to another thought.
It has a lot of lessons in it. So, for example, stop. I've got a gun.
The gun I gave you for our wedding anniversary, Eric? How could you?
We're not married.
Aha. We're not married is a denial. We've learned our first improv lesson. Very hard. It takes a long time to learn.
This is the problem with an engineer trying to learn.
It takes a long time to learn those basic rules of improv.
So why don't you take us through them? And they're in the book.
Sure, they're in the book, because I was an improviser at Second City and at a place called the Improv Olympic in Chicago. And I talk in the book about improv having really kind of changed my professional life and even sort of my worldview a little bit. There are some basic rules of improvisation. When you're creating something out of nothing, the first rule is to agree, which is to say yes, which we did do that successfully. You said, freeze, I have a gun. And I didn't say, that's not a gun, that's your finger. I said,
which is what a Google person would say.
yeah, well, no, I don't know.
Okay.
So we agreed. And the next rule is yes and, which is to add on to what you've already agreed upon. So the gun I gave you for our wedding anniversary, how could you? And then we hit a brick wall, Eric. But it's a very, it's funny because it's some very famous comedians there's an old story about Joan Rivers was at the Second City briefly in 1959, 1960, and they use this in class at Second City all the time, that there was someone came in and, said, I want a divorce, was the beginning of the scene. She said, I want a divorce, and whoever was with her on stage said, but what about the children? And she said, we don't have any children, which in the moment got a big laugh.
But stops.
But killed the scene. So that's, it's a very...
So my response would be...
human instinct.
Yes, we have children. I just didn't tell you. That's why we're getting
Yes.
divorced.
Yes. I have some other children.
Yes.
This is exactly why, yeah.
Another technique to help with concept generation is mind mapping. A mind map is a diagram of the various ways words, terms, themes, images, thoughts or ideas relate to one another. All words stem from a central word or image. You can start with a central idea, but if you know that there are sub-themes, then you can map them out and start there. Chances are you'll come back and change it all anyway. This is a technique that I find very useful for clearing my head at the start of a project. I write down everything I know and all my preconceptions. That way I can let them go and I can start thinking with an open mind. Finally, I strongly recommend you keep a sketchbook. A sketchbook is your private place. It is yours to do what you like with. It's a safe place for exploration. You don't have to show it to anyone, and it doesn't matter how well or how badly you draw in your sketchbook. It's great because it's bound, so it keeps all your ideas together. I'm notorious for writing my ideas on lots of different pieces of paper, and then I lose them and they get thrown in the trash or in the recycling. So the sketchbook really forces me to keep everything, even ideas that I think at the time are worthless. It's good to keep and have them there to refer to later on. Pinterest is my digital sketchbook. My Pinterest account is huge. I've got tons of different projects, tons of different boards in there. I use Pinterest for all my digital visual research whenever I start a project. I now have a whole collection of Pinterest boards and also a whole collection of sketchbooks at home. In fact, here's one. I'm not going to show you, but I've got a whole shelf of them up there. But they are my private sketchbooks, and there's personal work in there, there's professional work in there, but they're great. I go through about 2 of them a year. Here, I'll pop it open. This is the one I'm working on, I have at the moment, and it's just blank. Ooh, where's the camera? It's just blank paper, and I like having the elastic to keep it closed. I usually go through 2 of those a year, and it's small enough that I can fit them in my handbag, in my backpack, keep it in the car, and I never show them to anyone. If I sketch something worth exploring or discussing with someone, then I'll just sketch it again on a bigger piece of paper to show them that. You see, a sketchbook is where you are permitted to fail, to have bad ideas, to draw badly. That it's okay. And all designers are stuck at one time or another for a variety of reasons. The sketchbook can really help you push through that. There's a famous designer called Stefan Sagmeister. He's German, and he started his own agency in New York. He's known as the bad boy of graphic design because his work is often controversial, a bit provocative. Well, he self-imposes sabbaticals to recharge his creativity. Every 7 years, he closes his New York studio for a year-long sabbatical. All the staff have to go on holiday for a year, paid holiday. And the idea is that it will rejuvenate and refresh their creative outlook. He explains that the often overlooked value of time off. And then he'll do exhibitions of all the creative work he came up with when he spent a year in Bali when the office was closed. You know, that incubation, taking time off, having a sketchbook, working on other ideas, it's important. Your creativity is something that you have to nurture, you have to look after. It's basic self-care, really. Now, we can't all afford a year off, but I would suggest that you keep a sketchbook and embrace the process, and don't be hard on yourself. Accept that accidents are part of the process. Don't be critical. Accidents are fertile ground for new opportunities, for new ideas. And also embrace your intuition. Our brains learn to optimize their resources by doing a quick synthesis of past experiences. Intuition is simply your brain taking a shortcut based on everything you've learned in your life. Trust your intuition, because it will think faster than you do, and often it knows stuff that your brain isn't acknowledging. However, when you trust your intuition in graphic design, you still need to justify your ideas. Remember the verification step at the end of idea generation? That's when you take your idea and you have to logically justify your choices. So verification involves evaluating and supporting your viewpoint. So, in summary, design thinking is emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Concept generation includes preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. You can use rhetorical aids, Osborne's checklist, brainstorming, mind mapping. There are many other tools out there to help you come up with ideas. Keep a sketchbook, go easy on yourself, and trust your intuition. But you will have to validate your choices logically. Thank you.